Right now, it is time for the Frickin' Frack of Nick and Nack, Tim, Luke, and Greg Sean, the Appraisal guys, and Appraise this. We welcome in the dynamic duo. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, good morning.
All right. They're both here, raring and ready to go.
In the same place.
In the same place.
Right.
My goodness gracious. There must have been a cancellation of a
Mark
flight.
your calendar.
Oh, goodness gracious. All right. Well, I've got a wide range of topics, and I was looking for the audio clip, but I couldn't find it to bring you our first story. And it's Heritage Auction. They sold Muhammad Ali's WBC championship belt. Listen to this now. This is the Rumble in the Jungle. Muhammad Ali knocks out George Foreman with his rope-a-dope. Probably one of the most witnessed fights of all time. The belt sold for $6.18 million.
Pretty incredible, isn't it?
Well, you know, it's Muhammad Ali. You want provenance. It's the Rumble in the Jumble where he beat the supposedly unbeatable George Foreman.
Right.
You've got, I mean, everything adds up to being, other than maybe, it's even more important than him winning the title the first time against Liston. I think the Frazier fights are probably the most historic fights in boxing history. But this fight just had something unbelievable special to it. It was a worldwide phenomenon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a kid when it happened. But, you know, even as my father was a Golden Gloves boxer, so that was kind of my interest, only because it was his interest, and we were kind of forced to watch. But it was certainly a historic event. And when we read this, Tim said, "Oh my God, did you see this?" And so we read, saw the article, and it's an amazing thing. And you talk about provenance. You can't get a better provenance than the one and only piece, like a championship belt from this particular, it's just like definitely it has everything perfect about it. So the fact that it performed as well as it did isn't as much of a surprise as it is that it hasn't come up in the past. I was just curious as to why it didn't.
Well, Greg, this was all from one person's collection who collected a lot of these rare, desirable items that you haven't seen on the market. So this is one man's collection. And what they were saying is that there was hefty bidding back and forth for the belt, which means that there were a number of people who were interested in not only bidding, but also purchasing this particular piece. But it ended up going to a major collector. It's Jim Irsay, who's the owner of the Indianapolis Colts, and he is amassing an amazing Americana collection and a collection that focuses on rock and roll, and I think it focuses on sports and other Americana things. And baseball. So just very, very interesting that he was the final bidder, and he actually tweeted that out that he's the official, the new steward of this particular item, and it will join his collection. And actually, the piece will be on display at the Chicago Navy Pier August 2nd and September 9th in Indianapolis. So interesting.
Well, see, the great thing about that is he's putting it on. It's going to go around and periodically go on display, so the public can enjoy it. And when you think of athletes and you think of worldwide impact, there really, when you look at it, there is no one like Muhammad Ali. No one at all, and there's no one.
Correct.
No one expected him to knock out George Foreman. No one in the world expected it. and he became a three-time world champion. It's an amazing story, and if ever there was a $6 million well spent by a collector, I think that was it.
Yeah.
Well, you know, the whole thing about how you know, his whole backstory as well is another thing that makes this something that is really special. Because, you know, I think without a doubt, he probably, even 50 years from now, is going to be the most famous athlete ever. Just based on his story and his accomplishments and his giving back. So I mean, this is really quite a thing. And you know how I feel, Marshall, about having things squirreled away so that only like a handful of people can see them. It was nice to read that he's going to display these, and that he considers himself to be a steward, which has responsibilities in and of itself for these kind of collectibles. So it's just a great story all around.
Yep. For you folks that are not old enough to understand how significant this fight was, just Google Muhammad Ali, George Foreman, Rumble in the Jungle, and you'll understand what a worldwide impact that fight had, and you'll also understand if you Google Muhammad Ali, outside of boxing, the worldwide impact he had on everything from politics to hunger to race relations. He was truly a once in a lifetime person that you get to witness, and I'm glad we were around to witness him. That's all. So
Really.
Most definitely. I would also Google the Colts owner, Jim Irsay, because he has an amazing collection and he does tour it and lend it out. So you'll see some really wonderful things.
All right. Now, if $6 million wasn't enough for that, a mint condition Mickey Mantle card from 1952 is expected to exceed $10 million.
We saw that one too.
What recession?
I said, "Oh, we've got to talk about." Yeah, what recession?
What recession?
Well, here again, this is an extremely rare piece, and it's interesting because if you read about the provenance of this piece, it was sold back in the 90s by a dealer. His name is Mr. Mint, and he only dealt in mint sports cards. And he actually, for a short time, was a consultant when I worked at Christie's. So we're very familiar with not only the level of the item, and I remember seeing this card back in the 90s and when it sold, and now it is approaching that $10 million mark. I mean, I remember when we thought $1 million for a sports card was a lot, and now we're approaching $10 million. So it'll be interesting to see how this sells.
You know, you say approaching $1 million. I remember when you sold the Honus Wagner card, and it was $650,000, and that was a record back in the 90s for a
right.
And then, of course, everybody kept thinking, well, this card is, you know, it's going to go up. It's not going to go up. There was all of this press and everything. And finally, when it sold the second time, I think isn't that when it actually went over $1 million?
$6 million.
And
it did. It slowly got to $6 million.
Yeah.
But yeah, it went.
That's not a bad investment.
$3 million.
You know, 600,000 to get $6 million. That's not a bad investment.
I know.
But over time. But right. I mean, we're just seeing how people are not only coming into the profession, into the collecting profession, the collecting world, and say, hey, I understand the significance of this piece. The value characteristics are such that I want to get in while I can, and that's what they're doing. And I think a card, especially Mickey Mantle rookie card, is a great investment, and I think whoever ends up getting it, it may be a whole new record for a sports card at auction.
Well, the reason I mentioned those two names and those two, like Muhammad Ali and Mickey Mantle, they're two of the few names that you can talk about with anybody from 10 to 90 years old, and they'll and people will have, even if they don't know much about them, they will know who they are and what they did. There's very few people in the world that carry that kind of weight.
And when you stop and think about what was happening during their careers, as far as media and as far as 24-hour news cycles, which didn't exist, the everything that we learned about these sports figures, we learned the old-fashioned way, where there was not instantaneous news about their achievements. And so, consequently, even so, the millions and millions and millions of people who knew who these people were back then, and now, even with the advent of the internet and all of the things that you can find out in the 24-hour news cycle, there isn't really anything. I mean, it's reaching an entirely different segment of humanity, because I mean, even today, like, you could probably ask a 7-year-old who Mickey Mantle was, and if they're into baseball, they will know who Babe Ruth is. So these iconic figures, I think they've advanced to folklore status.
Yeah.
So, and I think they're just going to continue. I mean, not that many people remember some of the people that I can remember when I was a kid, but as soon as you mention Mickey Mantle or Babe Ruth or Roy Campanella, people like that, young kids even today know who those people are. So it's only going to make I think the desirability for these historic pieces even greater in the future.
All right. Well, now I think I hit a home run with the first two. My next little venture for you guys is a vampire hunting kit. Reportedly from the 19th. Listen to this: a vampire hunting kit, purportedly from the 19th century, sold for $20,000 in the United Kingdom. When it went out for auction, they thought, well, okay, $4,200 is what it'll get. It wound up getting just under 20,000 pounds. A vampire hunting
I don't know
kit.
if you remember when we first got started, one of the shows that we did was about the weird things that sell at auction. And if I recall, we actually did. The reason I'm chuckling is because this was back in, I guess 2008 or 9, I guess, and one of these kits came up, and as a matter of fact, we did an event, a fundraising event, an appraisal event here in Hobe Sound, and someone brought that exact thing, a vampire hunting kit. We didn't know what it was at first until we started. Fortunately, we did have the internet at that point, so we were able to figure out what it was. But I can't believe another one has come up. I mean,
and 20,000 pounds, which is not a small amount of money.
That's not cheap. We ended up, Greg, there was a time we were in New York, and we went to Sotheby's, and we went to view all the different things, and they actually had a vampire kit that was on display, and it was similar to this one. But what I find interesting are the contents of the kit, which means 2 matching pistols, a brass powder flask, holy water, a Bible, a wooden mallet, and a stake, because you need that to drive the stake through the vampire's heart, brass candlesticks, rosary beads, and more crucifixes. And the kit also contained Metropolitan Police paperwork from the area so that you can fill out your own police report while you're killing the vampire.
Now, the whole thing about this is it is actually, when you look at the box, it's a very beautiful piece of work, and it's but it's a little creepy. But
it is, and with those crosses on there, you would think, my first thought would be, oh, are there ashes in there? Like, what is this? But yeah, based on the photograph, that is pretty interesting.
I like the fact that everything has its own little cubby. When there's a tray that sits on the inside, and there are things that are underneath. It looks like a jewelry box, honestly, and then everything has its own little lines. Everything fits like those little puzzles when we were kids, where the big pieces fit. You had to find the square instead of the round part, and everything fits perfectly. And it's actually a piece of art in and of itself. So it would be a fun conversation piece to have, I think.
Now, here's what you got to think about this. You look at that box. How many people were killed who weren't vampires? Think about this for a second. How many people were probably killed and they weren't vampires?
Well, this goes back to yet another radio show we did early on about some of the weird things, and you wonder, like, some of these medical inventions. That's another thing that we've talked about in the past. Some of these things probably killed more people than they actually helped, and I have a feeling this is definitely one of the same things. I mean, it's. You just look, if you just wear a long flowing robe and get caught walking in the garden at midnight, you probably ended up having someone use this kit on you. So,
well, I don't know. When in looking at the photographs, everything looks pretty in untouched condition. I mean, it does look pretty put together. But that is, I never thought of that, Marshall. That is something to think about. Is how often was this used?
I'm sorry, I wouldn't want it in my house. I mean, it's pretty and everything like that, but just think about that. I mean, just like during the witch burnings and stuff like that. I mean, you think back and just think, talk about our society being weird now. It was really weird back then. And they weren't even stoned.
Right.
All right. So my next one is, and this is a headline that surprised me. Sotheby's is hosting an auction in Singapore. And what's surprised me about this is that it's the first auction in 15 years that an auction house is going after Asian clientele. And what amazed me about that headline is there's so many different wealthy Asians out there, the society. So 15 years just seems like someone really made a huge mistake over the past 15 years.
Well, it's kind of been going. It has been actually going on for more than 15 years, but probably in the I would say probably in the early part of the 21st century, like maybe 2000 to maybe, I think that might have been when it started. We started noticing that things that were being sold at auction internationally, a lot of them were silently grabbed up by Asians to get them back into their country. And now I think it's just because we're noticing it more because it's becoming more in the news. And a lot of things that were either taken out or exported are now goods. They're trying, the Asians are trying to get them back and repatriate them into their society again. But it just seems like it is something that has become much more, I guess, newsworthy, for lack of a better word, is because a lot of these things are finally going back because the people who would buy them were kind of under the radar. And now, because of the prices that a lot of the Asian things are getting, I think that's one of the reasons that we're hearing more about it. But
also, I think a lot of it is, and we always say this: follow the money. Follow the money, and where that gives you a little more insight and perspective. Singapore is the 6th largest finance center, so it's behind New York, London, Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Los Angeles. So the economics and the finance, that's the first thing. Second is that I think what Sotheby's is looking to do is they are tapping in on the younger collector base. They're focusing on, because they're not just selling everything, they're focusing on contemporary and modern artwork, because they're seeing that there's a lot of there's a lot of collectors and a lot of desire to add to their collections, and there's money there. The third thing, and yes, we can't get through a show without talking about it, is with the bust of the non-fungible token market, and that was an explosion, especially in that part of the world, in Asia, of investors and collectors. They are realizing that that's going down, and now they want to put their money into tangible artwork. And we've talked about this over the last couple of months, and I think that what we're seeing is the auction houses reacting to the shifts in the marketplace. And I think that's why you're seeing Sotheby's coming back to this region after so many years of not being there and holding these auctions, because of the number of people and the desirability, and they know that it would be profitable, because they would not be doing a sale there if they didn't think they'd have the proper audience.
Do you think the NFTs will ever come back to where they were, or are they now a thing of the past, like Beanie Babies?
Let's bring up Beanie Babies, mood rings, and earth shoes. Let's see. They're fun. You can get them on. They're still in the marketplace, but they're not going to be soaring to the levels. Now, we never know, but this is the category that I put it in at this point. So I think that it will level off, and I think that there'll be a trading at some point. Now, it will all depend on what happens with technology, because I can only frame that opinion based on the technological levels of where we are right now. As things change again in the marketplace, there may be something entirely new that we're not even aware of that comes out to take its place.
Well, you take a look at the display, the holographic display that's being used to promote an art auction. If you can do that, and you can do that beautifully well, just imagine if you have a holographic display of some important piece of art in the future. That might, but that's not an NFT. That is that's almost like having something there. Do you know what I mean? So you're right. The technology will dictate what happens.
Correct. And that's a little different in the way that intangible is being displayed. So that's why we keep talking about this, because it's an ever evolving and changing market that goes on.
Amazing. Well, guys, it's always interesting, and we went from Muhammad Ali and Mickey Mantle to Asia, and we'll see what we do.
Asia. Love it.
We'll see what we do next week. All right, guys, take care.
Hey, thanks. You too.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
Tim Luke and Greg Schramm, the appraisal guys, the frick and frack of Nick and Knack, with Appraise This here on Robin Hood Radio. You can find them, of course, at robinhoodradio.com. Click on On Demand. Click on Appraise This.